So FLOA, I thought the name was pretty catchy. Me and my best friend John, who works with me, we came up with that name. So FLOA, pronounced flow, stands for fasting like our ancestors. Really, what I did was I created structure where structure was missing in the world of prolonged fasting. I think, like we talked about 10 years ago, fasting was just in the infancy stages. Still kind of like brushed off by a lot. And I think now, I think it's safe to say most people, it's hard to argue that intermittent fasting isn't good for almost everybody, I think at this point. But prolonged fasting is still that area where I think there's a lot of, maybe fear, maybe concern. Is it quote unquote dangerous? I mean, it's crazy when people talk about its potentially being dangerous. When you think about ancestral times, for 3 million years, human beings, that's about how long most people say we've evolved. The earliest ancestors of humans, we didn't have steady food supply. It wasn't until like 10,000 years ago. I mean, so 10,000 versus 3 million, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody alive in the world today is a result of evolution's production of the most efficient species at developing the faculties within the body to be able to target food, consume a large amount of it, just like a bear going into hibernation, same concept, because we don't know when we're going to be able to get the next hunt and the next kill. And so that was almost 3 million years of evolution. So now, 10,000 years, we barely started getting steady food supplies. And it's really for the last couple hundred years, the steady supply then became all processed. And then we have 1977 when the holy, I always call this the holy crap year, where the government came in and made that decision for everybody and said carbohydrates
eat more carbs.
Yeah, eat more carbohydrates, and because of the concern over heart disease, and that's when obesity and diabetes just took off, like crazy. So, but anyways, the flow protocol really just has ancestral tenets. When we look at fasting, we work our patients into some pretty aggressive weekly rounds of prolonged fasting. And so to be clear, I work with medical practitioners because I am a doctor of chiropractic. So anybody that works in our clinic, they get managed by both. So our medical practitioners will review the medical history, provide the prescriptions when necessary for our patients, and then I take over basically the coaching, the implementation of the holistic lifestyle strategies. And the centerpiece of it is the fasting. That's not everything, but that is the most powerful. That's the bread and butter, because we're taking people who likely at the most have done intermittent fasting, but a lot of times they haven't even done that. And then we, over week by week, I created stages. So for me, stage 1 of fasting is intermittent, also known as time restricted. And my favorite version of that is the 16-8. We could talk about, if we have time, why I don't like OMAD, which is the 1 meal a day. But 16-8, get your eating window down to an 8-hour gap. Your first calories in, last calories in, that's your eating window. Compress that to 8 hours. Most people, it's like 12 to 14 to 16 hours between their, it's basically all day for most people. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily meals, but they're not thinking that coffee with cream is starting, right?
Good.
So that's stage 1. But the truth of the matter is, some people will have miraculous changes just by doing that. But for most people, you got to lose more than 20 pounds. That's not going to be enough. It really isn't. Because at that point, 20, 30 pounds overweight or more, you start finding heavier levels of insulin resistance. So they're in a deeper hole, and they need something more aggressive to get them out. And so that's where we start getting into the longer fasting. So for us, stage 2 is being able to complete a 24-hour fast 2 times in a week, spread apart. That's already pretty strong. And we'll get them into that, all right? And after they're there, they're able to do that. Then we start pushing the envelope to, okay, now the flow stage, which is stage 3, it's a certain level of difficulty to go dinner to dinner. Once you've mastered that, it becomes easy. But going to bed the first time where you haven't eaten all day since the day before, that's the big hump. And it's all mindset. It really is. I remember the first time I did that, fasted for that long, and went to bed, and man, it was like that for a while. Now it's second nature. I don't think about it. But there is a little bit of like, especially talking to so many patients over the years, it's like, I can do this? Like, I'm not gonna die? I could just go to bed not having ate all day, and that's okay. The irony here is, not only is that okay, that's actually a powerful thing, because you are forcing your body to mobilize the body fat. and tap into the energy system that it's called fat mobilization, fat burning system. And for a lot of these people, they just, their entire life, they've never done this, or they've only done it once or twice in the most extreme stressful situations. And if you do it like that, where it wasn't intended, of course the difficulty level is through the roof because you're already stressed out. Likely you didn't plan for it. When you plan for this, that's the difference between starvation and fasting. Fasting is planned caloric restriction as opposed to just daily caloric restrictions over time or when it's unplanned. So very, very different. Once they can do that, that's the 36 hour window. And then week by week, they're just taking that weekly long fast and extending it till they can get to the full 48. I have found for most people, even the very obese, once we can get them to their 48, that's like the hallmark. That's like, okay, great, I did it. Now do it again next week. Do it again next week. And we just have them find, even though you can make an argument that there's probably better results if you vary it every week, because it's 2 out of 7 days and people have usually a family and dinner is an event. I just have them plan it consistently. Say Monday night to Wednesday night, that's your 48-hour window. So your family gets adjusted to it, you get used to it, and it just becomes part of the routine. And so we have them do that week by week by week, and it's crazy how fast the fat is falling off their body while they're becoming more insulin sensitive, while they're becoming fat adapted, and while their inflammation is dropping, because we know fasting does all of that, and prolonged fasting does it even more. And this is the most aggressive format of prolonged fasting that I've ever seen. And that's why I created this protocol, because I felt like there was no structure in this world and came up with a cool name, and that's what we do. And I did it with patients before the medications and peptides, but man, it was hard. Like we talked about before, most people couldn't get into it. There was a lot of supplements I've researched over the years to help, and it's like David versus Goliath in terms of the strength that this medication offers. And I'm all for it. Better living through science is one of my favorite expressions that I got from Ben Greenfield. And I think it's so true because like you said earlier, like it's a switch that they need. They need that initial push. But I think the ancestral wisdom behind the fasting is what's going to make the changes very fast too, no pun intended, that they need so that when they lose the weight, all of a sudden now they're insulin sensitive again, their inflammation levels are more controlled, and they're fat adapted. Then what we do once we hit their goal, generally speaking, is they start to wean off the medication, still watching their weekly weigh-ins. That's the marker, is weekly weigh-ins. That's like your self-check. Is my weight stable? Yeah, they're looking at pictures, they're looking at their bodies, but really just making sure that their weight is staying the same. Then they do their first week of fasting without the medication. That's also a milestone too, because they're like, oh my God, I did a 48-hour fast without tirzepatide. I've never done that. It's a milestone to do it with tirzepatide, and then milestone number 2 is doing it without. And it really does show them, because everybody knows how hard it would have been to have done that fast in the past without the medication. It would have been impossible. Now they can, because we made those changes to their physiology. So it's step by step, right? Now they're fasting 48 hours every single week without the medications, weight is stable. Then the next step is, okay, let's go down to every other week, right? And then they do that for a month or two, weight stable. And then from there, they find their rhythm. I find that for most people, one 48-hour fast every 2 or 3 to every 4 or 5 weeks is necessary for most people to maintain a healthy weight for the rest of their life. Now, mind you, they're still doing intermittent fasting every day. They're still doing resistance training, and we're eating a lower processed diet, so paleo-Mediterranean, 80% of the time. During the program, I tell them 90-10, but when you're in, I call it flow lifestyle, which is where my patients are at maintaining weight. Now I go, okay, we can have more wiggle room, 80-20. 20% eat whatever the heck you want. Just weigh yourself once a week. Just keep doing that for the rest of your life. Just make that a routine, because that's your checks and balances. Mm-hmm. Anytime it starts creeping up, just increase your window of fasting. Because the reality is life is so dynamic. There's going to be months where stressful stuff happens and you fall off the bandwagon and you eat like crap and you stop exercising. Well, guess what? Now you have a thing that you can do. If you have to go back to fasting for 48 hours every single week for a month, just to kind of like undo all that damage and get back on track, fantastic. I can do that no matter how stressed I am. I can do that. But think about what tools they had before in the past. I got to go strict on my diet. I got to go to the gym for a ton of it. It's just not real with how stressful life is for most people. So I think that's why.